Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of the Genesys Cloud Community's Q&A show, the show where we answer your pressing questions in the Genesys online community. My name is Matt Lawson. I am your online community manager. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm actually really looking forward to the episode. It's a little bit of a throwback episode. We're going to be welcoming back one of our regular contributors, a dear friend of mine and probably an old friend of yours. I'm talking about the one, the only, and dare I say, the handsome George Ganal. George, my friend, long time no see. How are you doing today? I am quite jealous of your view this afternoon.
So my background, that's a picture I took up at Crater Lake in Oregon years ago. It kind of reminds me of nice fun times hiking in the outdoors, since I can't do that right now.
I've actually really been looking forward to doing this episode. We are getting back to our roots, George. You may remember, I think you were the very first guest we ever had on the show, and the format will be very similar to what we're going to do today. You came with a question that you wanted to discuss, kind of do a little bit of a deeper dive on, and then we're going to go into the community like we used to do at this point almost a year ago, and answer questions from the forum. I'm really excited. Are you excited?
Oh, yeah. Of course I am.
Well, then let's go ahead and get started. How about we kick it off with your show and tell segment. So, George, for your show and tell segment today, you wanted to discuss this question that was submitted by David. The question is regarding an agent removed from queue report. David writes, is there a report or any way of seeing when an agent is removed from a queue? We have a few agents that only took a few calls and several hours of sitting on queue during a busy call period. Now, George, I know you've actually responded to this, and so has our friend Chris, but on this episode in particular, you wanted to shine a little bit more light on API functionality or something like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, we get similar questions off and on, like who did what, who took this person out of queue, or did this person take themselves out of the queue, or how did this person lose a permission, things like that. And we do have this audit functionality that's in the API, but it's not intuitively obvious how to use it.
Cool.
And of course, this, David didn't even know that he could go to the API and pull up something fairly quickly to get to the information he wanted. So I just want to go over that audit functionality fairly quickly for me. Here, diving into developer.mypurecloud.com, this is the website where all of our development stuff is discussed. They even have their own forum for those who don't know. So you can ask questions about how to use the API. And within this site, there's a section called Developer Tools. And one of those tools is this API Explorer. So in this sidebar, I've got multiple tools, and the one I'm using is API Explorer. And within the API Explorer, we have a section for Audit. This Audit is not real new functionality, but something they put into the product to allow people to do queries to figure out who changed things in the system, in the admin interface. And they're adding more and more functionality over time. The development teams have to actually take advantage of the Audit microservice that's out there and set up their microservices to write to it. So it's not full-blown, it's not covering the entire system right now, but you do have multiple things you can look up. And I wanted to go over some of how to use the query because it's just not intuitively obvious here. There's a lot to what you need to configure so you can actually run a valid query. First thing to note, it's got an interval on here, so you need to do this fairly soon after the changes were made, or you need to know the time frame when it happened, because it only lets you look at 7 days total. So you could give it a 7 days, 2 months in the past, but you have to know the 7-day time period you want to look at. And then you also have to know the service that you want to look at. And over here on the right, you can see it's got contact center, content management for people who do stuff with documents, people permissions if somebody loses a permission or gets a permission they shouldn't have, stuff with quality, language understanding, topics, definitions, predictive engagement. So we got several services that we can look at. And then there's also a filter you can use. So you can filter things down based on any of these values, like a user ID. What if I want to know, for example, in this case, did a user take themselves out of the queue? Did they mark themselves inactive on a queue? Then I would have to have that user's ID to go back and look and see, yeah, did that user actually deactivate themselves? Not that the agent should be able to do that, but sometimes you give that permission. It gets a little bit more interesting when you need to figure out who deactivated a different user on the queue, because you need to use multiple user IDs to get to that information. So anyway, the audit functionality, just to get right into it, here I'm choosing contact center, and the property I'm using is a user ID. And let's say I want to find out if Graham took himself out of the queue yesterday. So I need his user ID, which means the easiest way is to go into the directory, search for Graham, and right up here, when I click on his profile, I can see the user ID up here in this URL. So I just have to copy that, bring it back over, and put it in this query. So I'm going to choose the contact center service, because that's where you track all the stuff about users adding themselves or removing themselves from queues and other things. Put in the property user ID, and then I'll just search on it here. Paste it in, and I'll send that request. Hopefully I get this nice 202 accepted back. And you notice it does not give me any results. So one more step. There's an ID down here, because this is actually what they call an asynchronous query. So I send the request, and then I got to wait for it to finish. Because a lot of times you're going to have 20, 30, 50, 100, 200, whatever results. And then I have to wait for it to actually complete. So I take this ID, which is the ID of my particular query here, copy that. Then I need to go to I could do a get status to figure out if it's completed yet. If it's a real long running one, you have to keep going back and checking the status to find out when it finishes. But now I'm going to get the results of the audit query. And I can just put in that transaction ID that I just copied from the other, paste it in. And then you have a page size here. If you're going to have a whole bunch of results coming back, I think the max size you can put in here is 100. I forget exactly. But you have to put in the page size, how many results you want back at one time, and then the cursor, you have to tell which page you want to look at. So if it has 1,000 results, you'd have to figure out which page within that 1,000 results you want to look at. Cursor 1, 0, 10, 100, whatever. But in this case, I'm just getting back a small amount of results, so I'll send the request. I can see here, results came back. Now this is maybe a little bit less readable than people would like. This is all regarding this particular user. So all this information is what this user did. When I put in the user ID on the other page, I was telling the system I want to know all the things that this particular user did under Contact Center. So I can scroll down a bit, and I see here there's a member update. So it did something to a member, and it says the entity type is a queue, so he did something on a queue, and we can actually see here the thing that was done, the property is joined. Now that doesn't say activated or deactivated, because we call it joined, or we say they joined the queue, or they're joined to the queue, I should say. So the queue member gives the queue, gives the joined, and then we can see the old value was true, so he used to be a member of the queue, and now the value is false. So this guy actually took himself out of the queue. And you can see the event date and time is right here, so it was 6:17, 6:19 in the morning Zulu time, or Greenwich Mean Time, UTC time. So you have to translate that over to your local time if you want to know what time local the change was made. So you can see this guy, yeah, he did take himself out of the queue, deactivated himself. And in this case, the ID, the entity that it was acted upon, is the same ID as the user ID we copied from up above. So that makes it easy. Yeah, this user right here, ID number, changed the activation of this person down here, which is himself. And actually, if I go a little bit further down, I can see that this person, Graham, also changed somebody else's information. So here's another ID, and that person was also removed from a queue. So he not only deactivated himself, he deactivated someone else. Of course, the fun part here is, who is this other person? It makes it interesting. You have to take that information, we'll show a query in a minute, to figure out who that really is. So that's if this person did something to himself. Now, what if you're trying to go a different route and say, well, Cheryl got deactivated in the queue yesterday or today or a week ago, whatever, and I don't know who did it. So that makes the query a little bit different in that I can't just put in Cheryl's user ID and query to find out who deactivated her, because it's only going to show if she did it. Because I'm looking at everything this user did. So I have to delete that part, delete the filters, because I really don't know who made the change. In this case, I'm going to send a request, and now I'm going to get all the changes during this time period for contact center. So you probably want to narrow it down to a single day if you're going to run a query like this, and maybe even just a time range. She went off queue, or she got deactivated yesterday at 5 p.m. So I'd make a narrow window of time and check that out. So I can send that request, and once again, I get an ID, and I'll have to go back and get the results of that query. So now that we've done the search and got the results back, I need to actually copy all those results. Control A, Control C to copy it, and I'm going to paste it into WordPad. Kind of a little bit of a pain. And now I need to go back and get Cheryl's user ID. So I'll just copy that from the URL for her in the directory. So I'll do a Control F and then Control V to find her. Here's Cheryl. Had her joined property changed, so somebody changed her from true to false on activation in this particular queue. And if I really want to get detailed, I would need to go back and find the queue as well to figure out which queue this was she was deactivated on. But it's the only entry in this one that shows a deactivation, so I'm going to presume it's the right one. And then up above, I need to figure out who did it. So, of course, there's not going to be any kind of username up here that says, oh, George did it. So I'll need to go find the section up at the top that shows the user ID of the person who made that particular change, because there's going to be a user ID associated with each one of these changes. Scroll down a little bit, you can see that's the user ID associated with the change for Cheryl. Complicated, wonderful stuff. So now I need to take this user ID, go back over into the developer tools, and in developer tools we have a get user profile. So I'll put in that user ID, and I find out that, oh, it was Graham Alexander here who made that change to Cheryl, deactivated her in the queue. So that's one quick example of, okay, who did this thing that messed everybody up? Well, Graham deactivated Cheryl, that's why she wasn't getting any calls in that particular queue. So now I need to go to Graham and figure out why he did it. That's a convoluted way of getting things, but it's how you can get all those results and figure out who did what to whom in the system during a particular time frame.
Very cool.
So that's a lot of stuff. Hopefully that's kind of helpful for somebody out there. It's just a lot more than I put into that post because there was just no room to do all this.
Right. Hey, that's the glory of this show, George. And just in the interest of transparency for anybody who's still watching, it took George and I a couple of tries to get this correct, and it happened for a couple of reasons that I wanted to point out real quick. First of all, George mentioned this going through towards the end, but make sure you grab the right ID, right? Pay attention to the different tags and stuff like that, because otherwise you might be searching for something that just leads to confusion. The other thing is, and George, we kind of discovered this, I don't know if it's necessarily a bug or not, but you at one point grabbed a bunch of information off of the body of a result and put it into a notepad. And that was because the Control F functionality was not working. And that was just your way of doing a workaround. So, for everybody out there, if you want to, you can try the Control F in that situation first. But if it doesn't return any results, you might want to just go ahead and grab the body, put it in a notepad like George said, and then you should be good to do the search there. All right, cool. George, thanks again so much for that demo. I'm sure it was helpful, and we'll make sure it gets to the user. Now, how about we get to hopefully some easier content, and maybe we can just hop into the community and answer a few questions. What do you think?
Sounds good to me.
All right, let's do it. All right, George, so it's time where I earn my keep as a host of this show and actually have something to do. I will no longer just be reading or watching what you are doing, but instead I will be reading these very challenging questions submitted by our loving community members. And let's start with Andres, who, would you say, Andres? Andre? As you can see, I'm horribly out of practice reading people's names, but let's go ahead and talk about expand the chat writing space. They write, hello, everyone. Our client implemented a chat channel, but is finding something that bothers the agent's work. The agent write space is too small. It would be ideal if this space is occupying half of the interface to make it easier for the handling of providing answers. Is there a way to modify it? And I guess what he was thinking here is that in a perfect world, it would be like some other boxes where you can expand the box or something like that, or even maybe the box would automatically expand and be responsive, something that I think we've all seen before, maybe used to. Naturally, I don't have the answers, but George, you might. What do you think? Any advice in this situation?
Yeah, looking at it, I don't think there's any way to modify the built-in chat dialog or window that pops up. You probably just have to write a custom client and go full custom on it and create it the size and shape that you want it to be. Yeah, as you know, there's no splitter there where you can slide it up and down or anything like that. And in the meantime, submit an idea on the Ideas Lab and ask for, there may even be one out there, ask for it to be changed so that it can be resized.
Perfect. All right, let's go ahead and hop into our next question here. It comes to us from, I'm going to go with Rahib. That's how I'm hoping or assuming it's pronounced. But they want to know how to schedule a recall of unreachable web callbacks. Rahib writes, hello. When an agent receives a web callback and qualifies it as an answering machine or no answer, I see that this lead is lost and she will not be called. Is it possible to do a processing for these web callbacks, qualifying as unreachable, to recall them automatically? For example, for each web callback qualifying as an answering machine, it will be callback after 1 hour. Currently, my web callbacks arrive from the website and they are attached to a queue. Is there a solution to solve this problem? Thanks for your help. George, personally, I'm not familiar with what he means by a web callback. I'm assuming he means like an automated call or something similar, but maybe you have a better idea of what's being asked for and if there's any advice that we can share. What do you think?
Yeah, it sounds like the basic process is somebody goes to a website, puts in their contact information, including a phone number, because they want some information about a product, and then the website automatically takes that phone number and turns it into a callback request, which gets dumped into a queue. And it does not sound like they're using the outbound dialing features, which to my mind would be a better way to do it. If you just, instead of just dumping the callback into a queue, you could dump it into a contact list in an outbound dialing campaign, give it priority so it gets dialed right away, because normally if you get to a person within 5 minutes of their having put in their information, you get a better chance of making a sale, whatever it is. So that would go into the dialing campaign with a high priority, be dialed right away, and then they could use the outbound dialing capabilities to automatically reschedule calls that hit answering machine or no answer, that type of thing, because that's built into the outbound dialer. If they want to do it with an agent, really somebody gets that callback and they would need to place the callback, find out that it's a no answer or a busy or answering machine. And in that case, I think they would just need to click the schedule callback button and schedule a new one for that same number. If they're just wanting to get it scheduled and put it out 1 hour, train the agents to do that. That's the primary way I can think of doing it. It would not be the same callback. It would be a different callback, but it would be going to the same person, same number, all that kind of stuff. It's just, it's more manual. If you want to set it up so they only schedule them 1 hour out, you could put a button into the script and have that do the scheduling of the callback, not allowing the agent to put in a date or time, but just automatically hard coding it to a specific 1 hour out kind of thing. So take the current date time, add an hour, and do the schedule for that. So those are a few ideas on what they might be able to do, but I'd lean more towards doing the outbound dialing.
Cool. Rahib, there's a lot of information there. You may have some follow-up questions. As always, feel free to leave them in the Genesys Cloud community. All right, George, I think we have just a few more here that we wanted to talk about. The next one comes to us from Vaughn. Vaughn wanted to know about, is there an API to check for group member status? Vaughn writes, does someone know if there's a data action API that I can use to check if all group members are on a connected call? I'm going to skip down a little bit. What he's hoping to do with an architect call flow is to first check if all group members are on a connected call, and if there's at least one that isn't used, the transfer to group action in the call flow, if they're either all busy or on connected calls. I'll take a different path in the call flow. I know I can use the failure path to do something similar, but for what I'm aiming at, I want to do the check up front before trying the transfer. George, what do you think?
I think it would be a real beast to try and set up. There probably is a combination of APIs you could use, but first you would have to figure out who the members of the group are and get all the user IDs, and then you would have to take all those user IDs, put them into an array, loop through the array, and go check each one in turn to find out if they're on a call or busy status, whatever. And then at the very end of looping through that array, decide whether or not you're going to place your call. Obviously, that array could go fairly quickly, but even if you do the check, it could be a couple of seconds, and then by the time you get finished with the check, somebody may suddenly become available or whatever. There's always that race condition. So yeah, if people are not making themselves busy or something other than a status that allows them to receive calls, then that call waiting feature is going to interrupt their ongoing group call with another call, unfortunately.
Gotcha.
There is, I think, an idea in the Ideas Lab to have the ability to turn off that call waiting. That's something that people have gotten used to in other systems, where you can just go check a box and say, disable call waiting. And that would prevent that from happening while they're getting those group calls. But we don't have that feature yet. It's just something in the Ideas Lab.
Gotcha. Cool. Let's go ahead. I think we have two more left here. This next one comes to us from Miguel, who wants to ask a question about displaying custom attributes on interaction details view. He writes, we have several custom attributes that get on a conversation as part of the Pure Cloud, now Genesys Cloud workflow. These attributes contain identifying information about our customers. We would like to show one or more of these variables, or even the UUI header, when viewing an interaction. So from performance interactions to interaction, to help with the auditing process. Is there a way to display custom attributes on an interaction details page? Can the interaction details page be modified? Even adding an external hyperlink with a conversation ID as a parameter would be helpful, as we could then do the API lookups to get the data we need to our auditors on our end. George, what do you think?
About all I can think of would be in the interaction details, you would have to do a query to the API to get the conversation details there, and that has some information in the JSON that would show all of those custom attributes, but there's nothing in the performance interactions menu that's just right built into the client interface. So it'd take more effort. You'd have to, like I said, do that API call and parse through the information on that particular interaction. So unfortunately, not there in the standard client. You can always write a custom client. That's the usual answer. Or you could get something like Pure Insights, and I think they would be able to put that together for you as well in a report format.
Oh, cool.
Because they gather a lot of the details and store them on the side and do a lot of manipulation of the data. I don't know that for sure, but I'm guessing they probably could.
Awesome. I know we've had, I think, at least one demo where Pure Insights has been referenced, but for everybody out there watching, if you would be interested in some more information on Pure Insights, please write to the show, qashow@genesys.com, and let us know that that's something you're interested in. George, we're in the final stretch here. One more question. I think you've been doing a very good job, but I'm a little biased. Let's see what Aziz wanted to talk about. It looks like SMS call flows. Aziz writes, I'd like to set up SMS call flow and achieve the following. Number one, route SMS to agents based on contact owner in Salesforce. Currently, the call's voice is routed based on contact owner and works fine. Number two, I'd like to send auto response to customer if the agent is not available. That means not in a ready state. Number three, I'd like to send an auto SMS to the customer just after our first SMS to inform them on how to stop receiving an SMS if they want to. It's a lot of SMS. I have created the attached call flow, but it is not working. Can someone assist? George, you want me to open up that call flow, or do you think you have a quick and easy answer for him?
You could probably open it up real quick.
Let's see what we got here.
There's no real quick, I know.
All right. Oh, it's coming, George. There it is. All right. So here we have the document. We're zooming in. Oop. Let me actually. All right. There we go. Let me know if you want me to go back to anything.
On there, what's the action he's got going on there? You're making me put on my glasses, aren't you?
I am. I guess in a perfect world, I'd just send you a link to this, but we are both very good game show participants, and we have closed our chat devices.
And this is flowing through pretty quickly, but I'm just wondering if there are multiple send responses in there. If I don't remember for sure on the SMS side, actually, Melissa Bailey could probably answer more quickly on the community because she knows all this stuff just off the top of her head. But it may be that we're hitting the limit of only one send response allowed per SMS flow. I'm not positive on that, but I think on the email side and maybe on the messages side, you may be limited to just one send response during the flow. Not positive on that. The other thing would be to send it off to Lexbot or something like that to give multiple responses, I guess, but then you'd still have to know whether or not the agent is available. Now you can go ahead and close that. I'm not seeing anything that I can really work through on the screen there. But yeah, I think you could probably do an API call to figure out if a particular agent is available or can receive an SMS through the ACD system, but doing that multiple send responses may not be possible right now. I just can't remember for sure.
Gotcha.
That might be why it's not working.
Gotcha. Well, we will, in our post when this episode goes up, I'll try to remember to mention Melissa to get a little bit of help on this. George, I think that's it. That was our final question for today's episode. As always, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge on the show. We really appreciate it. Anything you'd like to say before we sign off?
It's just been good to actually get together with you live again and see your smiling face and interact. It's always fun.
It's always just such a pleasure to see you. Glad all is well with you and your family, and let's do this again soon, all right?
Definitely.
All right, have a good one, my friend. Later. All right, everyone, that was our episode for the week. Thank you so much for tuning in and checking us out. Unfortunately, I have to run. While this episode was going on, I just heard my wife return from her first haircut since quarantine, and as you can see, I am desperately due for one as well. So I've got to get going, but please, always feel free to reach out to us in the community. Send us an email, qashow@genesys.com. Don't forget to give the episode a like. Don't forget to give our page a subscribe. All of that stuff really allows us to keep doing what we're doing. You all have been a great audience. We love seeing you in the community. Hope you are safe and well. And let us know how we can help. We love hearing your feedback. Thanks so much, and have a good one. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in for this week's episode. We hope it was helpful and maybe a little bit entertaining. Each week, our host and experts review community discussions and debate what content to discuss, so your voice matters. Did we miss something? Do you have a question for the show? Let us know. Join the conversation at the Genesys online community. As a Genesys customer or partner, you can create an account. Just click the sign-in button found on most pages and follow the necessary instructions to create an account. Also, feel free to email us at qashow@genesys.com. We'd love to hear from you. If this is your first episode, welcome. You can view our entire archives. Go to the Helpful Links panel found on most community pages and find the QA Show archive that interests you. We appreciate your support of the show and the community. Cheers!